Exceptional Radio. Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening. Wow, that was random. Exceptional Radio. Good evening. It's the 27th of August. There are riots in the north. A giant storm toppled a Confederate monument, and we're still waiting on that stimulus because the Democrats won't budge until the White House gives them more money, and the White House and the Republicans don't really want to give them more money. And so we'll see just how far this economy goes before it gets worse. It's a balmy 80 degrees, and it feels like 80 degrees, which is kind of interesting because the humidity is super high. And we've got a few things to talk about tonight. There's been a pretty concentrated effort by the media at this point to rewrite the way history is being told. A man was shot, and it took the local police like 3 days to announce that there was a knife in his vehicle. Then it took another 3 days to name the officers. I heard a good anecdote about this, though. It's you don't get your name as an officer until you shoot somebody.
What is that even supposed to mean to the general public? I feel like this is just the personal feeling. The reason why certain media outlets immediately look for the negative historical information about the victim of a crime, especially or the victim of a murder, right? Because we can call it a crime or we can call it a murder. We can call it a killing, but there are certain legal ramifications that require charges to be pressed, and that determines whether or not the crime is committed by that point. But why I think we have to ask the question, why do we have to hear about all of somebody's parking tickets or all of their issues with possessing any kind of drug paraphernalia several years ago, or any very minor misdemeanors that have absolutely no bearing on their actions within the past several months or even years? And I think it's supposed to be a certain justification for people who are used to living with privilege and used to existing within a biased and bigoted structure to just ignore what just happened and think that it's not a bad thing because look at all of the bad things that this person has done, and yet at the same time they get to ignore all of the bad things that they're a party to in their life, or it makes them feel better somehow about themselves. It's really a twisted paradigm.
Yeah, and I think one of the major aspects of it is that specific demographic wants to be able to justify killing black people, because if you look at the people who are always the first ones to say, well, why didn't he comply? Or he had a knife in his car. It's the same people who also don't want to comply with the mask mandates. So they only want black people to comply, and then they want to justify killing black people, but then they don't want to actually comply with laws themselves, and they want to be all Second Amendment, and then want to brandish their guns on the square in the faces of police when it was about the mask. It's the same exact people.
And not only that, There appears to be, some might even call it an infiltration or a subculture within organizations that have been tasked with policing communities that ascribes to the very same ideals as the people who present themselves as well regulated militias and counterbalances to the protesters who are trying to, in every way, voice their displeasure with the current state of affairs in regards to how, let's just pick one group of people, and we'll just say the displeasure with how Black people have been treated in this country for the past several centuries. And now we have this counterbalance that's essentially not treated as a form of protest, but it's treated as a form of peacekeeping. And I think that's a certain level of political doublespeak that requires people to be very easily influenced to a certain degree in order for that logic to really hold.
Yeah, I think that's a spot on analysis in that the capacity for them to subvert specific demographics without using their preferred slurs has also there. So, for example, like the housing administration, like response where they lifted the protections on where how people were placed. So effectively, homeowners associations can decide which demographics they like and which ones they don't like in their neighborhoods now. And they can say, oh yeah, if we don't like this specific demographic, let's say trans people, let's say we don't like trans people, we can actively exclude trans people from our neighborhood. We don't have to worry about getting sued for excluding trans people in our neighborhood anymore. Now they don't have to. But the law was specifically removed so that they could do it to Black people, because then what ends up happening is the housing market is racist in a way that when you see how homes are appraised, there's this recent article about a Black family who got their home appraised, and the person who was doing the appraisal was rude from the beginning, and then because it was a interracial couple, they removed all indication of any sort of Black resident or any sort of Black person ever living in the home, and then put up things that would indicate that it was only the white person in the couple that was living there. And sure enough, their home got appraised over $100,000 higher on a second appraisal. So this is where if you have a home and you're a Black person and you're trying to put it on the market, then you get your home appraised and you have all of the things in your home. There's a very strong possibility that you could have your home appraised for 25% or even more less than the market value. So then when you actually go to sell that home, you're not going to end up with as much money as the white person who lived in that same exact home. So then the money you have is less than the same white person in the same situation. So now we have scientific evidence of Black people not being able to get the same sort of equity in the real estate market, equity in the workplace, equity in policing. So there is no place in this economy in which Black people are getting equity or equality for that matter. So when we're talking about how these things are then enforced through policing, that's how you end up getting property protected more than Black people's lives, because when you have a system that will give black people less money for their work or for their property, then that system will protect the property more because they can exploit black people to create property. And that system is very much aware of that. And that's why black people say fuck the police, because police in this country value property more than they value my life as a black person. No matter how much I contribute, no matter how much the government steals from me as a stolen person who is then stolen from in the form of taxation, never mind not getting reparations. For a black person to be having their fucking paycheck taxed in 2020, that's just fucking theft. So you telling me my ancestors went through all that shit, my native ancestors went through all that shit, and I'm still getting taxed as if I got reparations? And then the police are gonna act like I'm not paying taxes and they're gonna treat me worse than an illegal alien, because even illegal aliens can't get murdered the same way that black people do. There's this level of, if the police were murdering illegal aliens the way they're murdering black people, the fucking UN would have to actually step in because they're not our citizens. So they can't actually, the way they're detaining them like that is because they just can't flat out execute them the way they're doing us. So there's this notion, and I'm not comparing plights. I'm just trying to, there's a caste system going on, and the police and ICE are the fucking brown shirts. And then the fucking, the federal military that gets sent in to fucking quote unquote keep the peace when black people are trying to let our voices be heard when we are being murdered in the streets by these brown shirts. Those people are the fucking SS getting called in, because what ends up happening is you take black people out of this situation and replace them with Jews. It's the same fucking shit. And when people try to compare it to Nazi Germany, and then the white people who are doing it get mad, it's because they don't want to let up on the gas. They want people to then stop comparing them to Nazis because they want to keep putting their foot on the fucking pedal, and they want to keep killing black people, and they want to keep fucking being anti-Semitic, and they want to keep that fucking subversive shit going, because the only way we can stop it is when we fucking stand up and fight back. And they want us to say, oh, I thought you were on the left wing. You're supposed to be nice. No, that's not what that means. I'll still punch a fucking Nazi in the face. I'll still punch a fucking Nazi in the gut. I will do things to a Nazi that I will not do to an actual human, because Nazis aren't human. I'm not equating Nazis with humans. We are past that point. Anybody who identifies with the Nazi ideology, I'm not considering them the same species as me. So in that regard, when you have a whole bunch of police who are acting like fucking Nazis, who are Nazis on the weekend, who are Nazis under their uniform, or they're making the police uniform synonymous with Nazihood. When those people are doing what they're doing, punching them in the face is not. I'm standing up for the oppressed if I punch a Nazi in the face at this point in history. So we're not going to act like Nazis have the capacity to get the same level of treatment as a human being. They don't. No, they don't. We're not giving Nazis a seat at our table. We decided that as a fucking civilization. Before I was born, they decided that. We're not entertaining that shit again. The police right now represent these fucking Nazis. So that's why we need to fucking deconstruct the Nazi regime that exists in America, so now we can get back to actual ideals that were written by lying ass racist white men who were trying to pretend they were more pious than they actually were in real life. Because you can't be a fucking man of God and own a goddamn other person unless you rewrite God to make it okay for slavery like they fucking did. So this is what I'm saying. There's all these things about the American construct, white Jesus, this whole slave catchers turn into police force wearing these fucking dyed brown shirts, black or blue, whatever the fuck color they wear in each district. These people are fucking Nazis. There's no way around it. So this is what I'm saying. Police is the equivalent of Nazi in America at this point. We have no capacity to beat around that bush. And if you don't equate them, you're not fucking paying attention is what it comes down to. And this is not to say, this is not minimizing any Jewish plight. This is acknowledging Operation Paperclip. The Nazis came over here, y'all. This is not metaphorical. The literal Nazis are over here. The literal Nazis are in our government. The literal Nazis are police. I'm not metaphorically comparing America to Nazis. I'm saying they're here. They're fucking showing their little white power bullshit okay signs. They're flashing that shit. They're changing their symbols. Just because they're not always wearing swastikas doesn't mean they're not Nazis. And this is where I'm saying we're at a point where we have to have this conversation specifically because they're trying to diffuse the conversation because they know we're on to them. They know we know they're the fucking Nazis because then they're trying to say, oh no, we're the Republican Party of Lincoln. We freed the slaves. yeah, we freed the slaves. It was us. Those Democrats were the ones that were in the South at the time. Because yeah, guess what? All of America is racist. The left in America is fucking racist and the right is racist. The left just has to be less racist and they don't want people to die generally. So in that regard, yep, the Democrats have a racist fucking history and the Republicans have a racist fucking history. I'm not going to let either side off and I'm not going to give Democrats any more credit than they deserve because they've done a lot of shit that's hurt the black community. It's like at this point, I can't talk about the Republicans without talking about the Democrats because they've got black blood on their hands too. So that's what I'm saying. At this point, we got to take the politics out of this discussion in that both sides have done too much to then be like, oh, the Republicans are Nazis. No, there's Nazis on the fucking right or on the left too. Because Peter Buttigieg, or however you say it, that dude's a fucking Nazi. I don't care if he's gay. That dude's a fucking Nazi. Like, the way he policed his black community, that dude is a fucking Nazi. So then the problem becomes when you have undercover Nazis that are also on the left and you try to call them out, then the people who are too reactionary on the left and say that in America, there is a problem for many people to be able to like something and not be able to criticize it. So if you like something, if you're in America, generally you're not allowed to criticize it, but because then people will say, but I thought you liked it. Why are you criticizing it? It's like, you can't have requests for room for improvement and also simultaneously say you like something because then people will call you a flip-flopper in a country that does not allow nuance.
You know, I like to criticize things that I'm interested in and care about because I know enough about them or I utilize those services or whatever it is enough that I have an opinion about it. I think that criticism is healthy. Criticizing anything it's how we gain deeper understanding or we improve things even.
Sure. I mean, just the basis for having a disagreement or an argument, as long as two parties or even one party having a disagreement or an argument with themselves are capable of doing it in a civil fashion, entertaining opposing viewpoints or identifying places where their logic regarding a particular matter falls short. I mean, that indicates the capacity for critical thought, thoughtfulness, and also a desire for peace and understanding and unification between minds and people. But going back to, Chris, what you were saying about how you can't at this point, and I think more broadly, I don't think there was any point where the relationship between the action, the thought, and the speech of both the Democrat and the Democratic and the Republican and whatever other parties there were at the time they can't be considered mutually exclusive in this country really at any time based off of the actions of just about everybody who was involved, at least in those major parties, even before and after the name changes and the switches. And in regards to just the not just the principles, but the ethical, the moral, the humanistic or lack thereof, the lack of humanity in some of these approaches to interacting with, supporting, relocating human beings when compared to the challenges, the plight, the experiences of the Jewish people throughout history, everything that you described is something that the Jewish people have always sought to, on some level, have either taught that it should be avoided, has taught that it should be something that is something that should be reviled or essentially kept from proliferation. And these are actions that we have as a people encountered and endured over millennia from various societies. So it's nothing new. And the fact that these principles, the principles of the fascist regimes, exist within the current governmental structure is something that should be acknowledged in terms of how the thoughts, the speech, and the actions of the people perpetrating these negative and destructive ideas and principles and acts are basically represented within our society.
Well, yeah, because I'm not okay. Because like that's a good bookend, so I'm not trying to like amend or make an addendum to that point because that was a well articulated point. I think what ends up happening is when we have something that is going okay, I don't even know how to say it, the serial perpetual police murder followed by an outcry followed by more police violence, that is what the outcry is trying to speak out against, has become a perpetual cycle that in the middle of a pandemic and multiple hurricanes and fucking fire tornadoes and fucking multiple water spouts, it's like one of these things where if you're narcissistic for our species, it feels like the end of our species. But if you are more aware of the long-term impact of energy influence on inanimate objects, and then that energy's resurgence through inanimate or animate objects, this is the equal and opposite reaction. This is just physics you're seeing. When you see cops beating the shit out of black people, that shit doesn't disappear into a vacuum. When you see cops, or when you see white people watching that happen to their black friends, that shit doesn't disappear into a vacuum. What we're seeing is the is not even equal. It's an opposite reaction that is, it's almost a suppressed reaction that is meant to say, hey, if you're wanting an equal reaction, we're not that type of person. If you want to kill us, we're not trying to kill you just to be equivalent. We want our lives to be equal in the way that they're valued, not the way that we extend vigilante vengeance or blood feud execution. That's not what we're trying to get equality for. And that's the craziest shit about it is these police are sent out in riot gear, military gear, as if that's what black people are saying, as if that's what black people are asking for. And we're nowhere near that. We are nowhere near that as black people in what we're asking for. That this whole, not this whole thing, but a lot of this shit in the most recent part started with effectively a dude taking a knee. So when we're saying the people that are then turning around and rioting at buildings because someone protested repeated police violence against people, repeated against violence against fathers, mothers, daughters, sons, against human beings who have relations with other people, who have relatives. When these people are protesting the deaths of human beings and burning the property that are then shown to be valued above those human beings, the people that then call those police to reinstitute the property's the property's rank above myself as a black person in this cast are the ones that are keeping us stuck here. It's the ones that are okay with the cops. It's the ones that are okay with the cops protecting the property above black people. It's the ones that are okay with the cops murdering black people in the streets, even though we're supposed to have trial by jury or trial by judge before someone is executed if it's in a fucking capital punishment state, because every state doesn't even do capital punishment anymore. So this is what I'm saying, like, is Wisconsin a capital punishment state while these people are justifying this dude being murdered? I'm not going to look it up just to be like, it doesn't fucking matter, because he deserved a fucking trial. So when we're saying, oh, judge, jury, and executioner shouldn't be in the street, everyone should be ready to rebel over that very notion, because if there is a class of people that do not have the capacity to protest without the threat of physical violence, those people don't actually have civil liberties. So black people don't have fucking civil liberties. Not only do we not have equity in real estate, in the fucking workforce, in representation, we don't have fucking civil liberties. But people think that we've come so far because we had Barack Obama, and they're willing to, like, whenever fucking left-wing people who are further right than me will, like, somebody will hear this shit, well, you better fucking vote in November. You better fucking take your ass to vote. You're voting for Biden, aren't you? You are just as fucking dumb as those fucking right-wing people. Anybody who heard that shit and would go tell me to vote, fuck you. Fuck those people. Fuck those goddamn people. They can kiss my fucking ass. It doesn't matter how I'm going to vote in November. If anybody's response to anything I just said would have been to tell me to vote, I would have fucking punched them in the face too. Like, straight up. I'm at that point in my life. I don't need some fucking person telling me to go vote like I'm fucking 17 years old, like this is my first fucking election. Nobody needs that shit. Nobody needs that shit. Not a black person, not a person on the left. We are fighting fucking Nazis right now. We are fighting Nazis. Telling people to vote is like kicking somebody on your own team in the fucking parts that would hurt. If there were a woman, kicking them in whatever parts that would hurt them. If there were a man, kicking them whatever parts that would hurt them. That's what telling somebody to vote in times like this are. I can't tell you how many times whenever somebody who calls himself the left winger tells me to fucking vote, I just want to punch him. I don't, because I'm a civilized human being. But the whole reason I'm saying that is because that's how motherfuckers like me feel. When people get entitled as fuck and think that when I'm a black man who has to deal with being a part of a caste system that other people don't even have to acknowledge exists, and those motherfuckers feel entitled to tell me to go vote after I pour my heart out to them, I want to punch them in the fucking throat, not in the face, just in the throat. That's what I want to do. But because I'm a civilized human being, I don't do that shit. And usually I'm like, okay, I'm going to vote. Of course. I might vote for fucking Mickey Mouse out of fucking spite, but I'm going to vote just to shut those fucking people up. Because God damn it, that's the wrong fucking response. When people are pouring their hearts out and people are oppressed and people are in a position where they are being held hostage between two political parties who go back and forth, playing the fucking sides, switching their little costumes. Yeah, guess what? Democrats and Republicans, they can switch sides. So in 30 years, the fucking Democrats will be like, yeah, we were fighting for black people once, but we're for white people now. In 30 years, they could just do that shit. And what the fuck are people gonna do? Oh no, Democrats fought for black people when I was young, but they don't do that shit anymore. The fucking problem is the Democratic Party, when I was a kid, guess what? They didn't allow for fucking gay marriage. So if I harken back to the Democrats of my youth, we're going to have to go back to 2014 when it wasn't legal for gay people to get married, because that's the Democratic Party I grew up with. The Don't Ask, Don't Tell Democrats. Don't Ask, Don't Tell was fucking left wing. That used to be left wing policy. So that's how we end up with a black president who doesn't stop fucking cops from killing black people, because he's powerless against the racist ass Democratic Party, who then pretends it's fucking not racist by trotting a bunch of token ass minorities out and a bunch of token ass women when the women still aren't getting paid fucking equal either. Of course I'm not a Republican. Anybody who heard that and was this no, fucking of course not. I'm just saying you can't be in this country and have a fucking problem with something and still be like, yeah, but I like that better than this other thing, because people are too fucking reactionary. And this is like the weirdest place to be at historically, because I feel like I'm a rational person right now, but there are people, like a lot of people would say I'm crazy for even saying shit like this, for even just questioning the left wing in the middle of this, for questioning anything the left wing take a fucking knee in some kente cloth without fucking doing anything. The people who took a knee in that kente cloth, they ain't fucking defunded shit. So what the fuck was that knee for? What the fuck was that kente cloth for? It was a bunch of show. They're trying to get me to fucking vote for them, and they're not gonna take away the fucking police funding? I mean, again, I'm not voting for fucking Donald Trump. Of course not. That fucking racist ass orange motherfucker. Of course I'm not voting for that like that dude. No. But that doesn't mean I can't fucking talk shit about the Democrats. And this is like, when we're in the middle of these hurricanes and we are still trying to justify a black man not having to validate why he shouldn't be attempted. They didn't execute Blake. They tried to execute 7 fucking shots in the back. The only reason that dude survived is because our evolution has made it really hard to kill black people. Like, we're real hard to kill at this point in our evolution because there's so many generations of people just trying to fucking hunt us off that we've evolved. So if you shoot a black man in the back, he might fucking 7 times, he might fucking survive that shit. Point blank range. He fucking survived 7 shots because of generations of fucking hunting and fucking murder. That's why he survived that shit. It wasn't luck. That's evolution, y'all. That's what evolution looks like. You kill a bunch of black people for fucking generations, they get real hard to kill. It's fucking crazy how that shit works. And then you get a bunch of big dudes in the fucking NFL. They're like, oh, why is all these dudes so fucking big? It's because we've been hunted for so long. It's fucking eugenics, man. Y'all don't know what these fucking people have been. The Nazis have been trying eugenics for a bunch of years, and they copied their shit off America. America been doing eugenics before the Nazis. All I'm saying is there's some side effects that they didn't fucking anticipate. They didn't fucking plan for that shit. They ain't trying to make us harder to kill. That's not what they're trying to do. So all I'm saying is when you have this dude getting shot 7 times in the fucking back, I'm looking at that shit saying, hey, this is evolution, because I'm at the point where this is happening far too frequently to not affect this population. We are a very specific demographic in a geographically isolated region. Over time, a specific biological restriction, it becomes a bottleneck, and the only things that make it through that bottleneck are going to be affected by that bottleneck. So all I'm saying is that's fucking evolution right there. So when these people are trying to fucking kill us off, is it because it looks like they're scared. It looks like they're scared. Oh, you're saying this dude had a knife in his car and you got to shoot him in the back 7 times? Oh, you're scared, homie. You scared. You real scared of that dude. That's a powerful ass dude. He had a knife in his car. You shot him 7 fucking times and he didn't die? Oh, that's a powerful ass dude. You probably should be scared of that dude.
Well, he did manage to calm down 2 black females who were arguing. So maybe he saw that and was like, holy shit, this guy's got the voice.
Like, hey, he wasn't even the person that was the threat that was called on him.
Yeah, he was there to calm down his friends.
Yeah, he was able to. This dude was able to do what those guys can't do. He was able to stop a potentially violent domestic dispute without a fucking gun. He had a weapon in his car. He didn't threaten them ladies with a knife. He stopped the dispute without a weapon. The cops can't do that. Oh yeah, they're scared of this dude. That's what it is. So my thing is, again, when you have these people trying to say that they're the superior race and they're fucking scared of black people, they're scared of black men so much that if you're a black man with a knife in your fucking car, they are so scared that they will put 7 shots in your back because you might not die. That's why.
Well, I think Steve Bannon is all that we really need to say about the superiority of any group of people. If humans can produce a Steve Bannon, I mean, the guy has blood oozing from his pustules, and he looks like he's been poisoned several times. I don't know if he has or not, but he just looks like it. But I think that it's hard to claim that any demographic is superior if there are incidents of genetic malformation or developmental issues, physical developmental issues. These are part of the gene pool. These are part of the code that makes us all what we are. Some people express these traits and others don't. And it's not quite as simple as white people are superior because they built Rome. Is Rome really the measure of it all? Is England the measure of all? The British Empire? Because a lot of those things relied on slavery.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Did they actually build them with their hands? Did white people actually build the White House? That's not how that shit worked.
Well, the White House was made out of brick until it got sacked and set on fire by the British. So, then they painted it white.
I mean, but still, I'm saying that shit wasn't gonna be built by white hands in a period where there's fucking slaves being owned. Like, that's what I'm saying. These people will take credit for subjugating some a people and then making whatever creations were built on stolen labor as if the oppressors actually created that shit. Like that's not how we shouldn't even acknowledge that shit in 2020. Like there's no way that we can acknowledge the uh the people who had the idea to subjugate and exploit as being on equal ground as something that is created without those two things being involved, because everything that is created in the past does not have subjugation in its origin story. And I think that's important to be like, if there's subjugation involved, like the subjugated should be the ones getting credit. If Jewish slaves actually built the pyramids, we need to give the Jewish slaves credit, not the person who made the plans. Like if that's what actually happened, that's the narrative we need to have in the like modern times. Like not to say like I know that that's not necessarily the case. But I'm saying if that were the case, then that would be what we would need to do, and not say, like, now that we know, or there is more proof that the people who built the pyramids weren't actually slaves most of the time, and they were actually coming from different regions and being well fed and well taken care of. That's a new narrative because it was all about slavery before, to then make it seem as if everything that was great must have come from slavery, and the people who subjugated the slaves were the great ones because they were just doing God's bidding by making those beasts their beasts of burden. Those aren't actual humans yet until we civilize them, and that's where the white Jesus aspect comes in, and that's the whole reason as to why all of this shit is interrelated, because then that's how you get the fake Christians talking about they're pro-life but then don't want women to choose, but then also don't care if black people get killed by cops, because it's a whole big interrelated lie that at the core is white Jesus. Like white Jesus is at the core of all of this bullshit.
I wonder how many times they have had to revise history just to get us to this point.
At least the fucking Council of Nicaea.
Well, yeah.
Because there was two of them, so at least those two.
Well, we've got like Dionysus and Osiris, and what other tales of the one precede Jesus? I'm drawing a blank now. I just keep thinking of the Matrix. There have been plenty of documentaries that explore the story of Jesus as being constructed from borrowed elements of other saviors.
Yeah, at least Horus, and then Zoroaster, and then Moses. It basically is like a lot of Moses' story.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of similarities with Dionysus and Osiris as well. Like direct, like one-to-one, apples to apples.
Yeah, for sure.
Like stripped direct from those stories. So we know that they've had to revise the history numerous times. They've had to change names. Lately, I've been feeling like a lot of what governments do is because we don't actually have real change. We don't actually have restructuring of economic systems or of social systems. We don't have the restructuring of government, for that matter. We end up with the same thing with a different outfit and different labels. And so I'm wondering how many times have we actually experienced that? It's got to be more than we can even know, because we haven't had really accurate historical documents for, well, except for the last, I mean, I want to say like 2,000 years, but I doubt it's even that accurate. Maybe 300 years.
It wasn't because like the Dark Ages is like in the West specifically, when the record keeping fell apart between the 5th and 15th century, So everything between there, unless you're upper class, is poorly recorded.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what I mean. And not just quality of the records, but
yeah,
access, overall access. I mean, I doubt that anyone could have just walked into the Library of Alexandria and looked up, some information. They would have had to have a really good reason to enter a library. They would have had to be purchasing land or selling land or looking at land titles or looking up some other kind of information that was necessary for something larger than, personal interest.
right. Yeah, because
A lot of the old libraries were these bespoke chambers of literature that were collections of owned by wealthy people. So we people on the ground wouldn't have been writing those histories. It would have been curated by a group of librarians, historians, scholars. But to do any of those things 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, you had to come from a wealthy family.
right, and this is sort of how we get the notion of secret societies or
Mm,
um, things like the Knights Templar or Illuminati, shit like that. These are the Jacobians. Um, these types of periods where knowledge is accumulated in repositories, but also restricted access, then it's not an inaccurate way to describe the situation because when you have information asymmetry, the people with the most information have the most power in these types of situations. So then that's why the people closest to the repositories always ended up having the most influence to the furthest distance, but didn't have to go the furthest distance because they were in control of the information. So this is where, as these people are coming and going from these repositories, it becomes more and more mythical and more like, the way that we have. I mean, the Library of Alexandria is mythicized for a reason, but everything that was in it, not everything, a lot of the stuff that was in it still exists because it was accumulated from other repositories around the world. It just happened to be like a bunch of different stuff from around the world in one place. So if you have a repository in, in China, a repository in Ethiopia, a repository in Mexico, but all of those things have then contributed to Library of Alexandria. Obviously, they didn't necessarily. This is just an example. Those other repositories still have those materials. They're not just collected. Because what ends up happening was the way that the Library of Alexandria would store things is they would get copies effectively of anybody who came through the ports of anything that was useful, and probably a lot of times shit that wasn't useful. So you're accumulating materials from all around the world. So the one of the reasons that it's so um, historically known is because of the wide variation, which was probably the largest repository at the time, not the only repository at the time. So that's one of the things that is often misrepresented about it. And that's like, it's funny because then it's not to say that, oh yes, of course it's a massive historical loss to have that major single repository. But then it's further framed in the West as if all that knowledge was fucking lost. To say, like, that's why they then exaggerate these things
yeah.
to these other narratives, like, oh, China doesn't know what happened in its past. Like, no, they fucking know. Like, China didn't lose its history because the Library of Alexandria burned.
Mm,
That's not how that shit happened.
the Chinese libraries were still intact, using paper and printing presses long before the library long before Europe had a printing press. I
Exactly.
mean, uh,
Yeah, you hear
it,
about those libraries.
yeah, it's. I mean, the Library of Alexandria is a point in history when the West lost a collection of knowledge. But you're right; it wasn't the only collection. It wasn't the one stop shop for all knowledge. It was a one stop shop, but not the. There were definitely more than one. some in
Yeah.
other languages that wouldn't have been accessible to Europeans too. So
They have to keep up that narrative that it was the only one. Like that narrative isn't the way it is in academia. That narrative is how it is in um, pop culture and layperson culture. So that's where, like, academics know that. Academics know what I just said because the only reason I said it is because of talking to other academics about it. And it's like, you know, there's a whole lot of shit that um, when it's in an academic journal form, the CNN or MSNBC article that is then extrapolated from that academic form is so often misrepresentative to the point of being misinformation that it is um, a legitimate problem in 2020 that I think obviously we're doing this show to help people be more uh, empowered to think critically and assess information. But that, like, I don't know how often I've talked about Google Scholar. Like, that's just another, example. And the whole reason I say Google Scholar is because it's free to use, whereas LexisNexis and other academic search engines aren't. If you're looking for academic resources, you have to use academic search engines. Google is not an academic search engine. It does not bring up academic articles first, if ever. And one of the main reasons is because they sell placement on the search engine. And their search engine is also influenced by popularity. It has nothing to do with peer review or if the information has been looked at by someone who is a professional in that field. Whereas you can turn on a qualifier on Google Scholar to only return peer-reviewed articles, and that is something that every subject does not produce a peer-reviewed article. So if a peer-reviewed article is produced about what happened to Jacob Blake, that shit probably won't be out for like 6 months or a year. Just that's the way peer-reviewed articles work. It takes a long time to actually put out a peer-reviewed article unless there is a very strong reason for an institution to push one out. Usually that process takes like at least a couple of months because it takes multiple people. But the news stories that come out on CNN and the headlines, they have nothing near the same level of rigor and restriction placed on them as academic articles. That's why a peer-reviewed article takes months, where CNN can be on the site and write a story and publish it immediately. What people think of as facts because it's being run on a news station are actually they should all have asterisks saying these are facts that are subject to change because they have not yet been peer reviewed. And it's like, this is why you have 3 different versions of the Bin Laden execution story, because by the time the first one had run, a second version had come to the news cycle and they were correcting it. And by the time the corrections cycled through, they had a third version of the story. So instead of waiting to actually confirm what happened by peer reviewing, they ran the story before peer reviewing. And while peers were reviewing in real time, the third iteration of the cycle finally got the story right, or what we can only confirm through third-party sources as being right, but other sources have then confirmed against each other that are closer to the actual incident that is then trying to be articulated as a fact. This is something, again, that it's a process. Facts do not just get reported. Whoever
I think we lost you. So Earlier this week, the United States government warned.
Whoever is reporting a fact is a bias.
Cutting in and out. Okay, so on Wednesday, the U.S. government reported that North Korean hackers are tapping into bank accounts around the globe to make fraudulent money transfers and cause ATMs to spit out. Yeah, and it's this is kind of amusing to me. This is almost like to be a bank robber now. You don't actually have to even set foot in the bank. You could just use your fingers. Let your fingers do the walking, in a sense. We got a we've got a really interesting scenario here actually where someone goes to a bank and they say you're being robbed and they don't do anything. You know, don't don't give me any money. Just sit still. Everything's being okay. They don't even, but that of course wouldn't happen.
Yeah. It's if you're trying to rob an actual bank physically, you're an idiot
Yeah.
in 2020.
I mean, North Korea, they're not even in this country and they're robbing our banks. That's
But,
just unreal.
well,
And
but that's just like, okay, supposedly, what's his name? Uh, what's that dude's name? Ellen Muskie, Husky.
Kyle Schwa's dad or whatever.
Whoever owns Tesla,
Oh, that idiot.
that person is supposedly now the fourth richest person in the world. But it's all in speculative assets. So what I'm not just starting to realize it is they are becoming too quick to expose their efforts at undermining assets that are not the US dollar. Because what I realize is you don't have to hyperinflate the dollar if you can hyperinflate an individual's fortune. So when you have multiple, like 2 or 3 companies that then start to command values that dwarf small countries' economies, you are actually hyperinflating your dollar through their stock price because they get way more spending power through collateral lending and loans, like lines of credit, that because they have so much stock value, quote unquote, then they can use these other things using their stock as collateral. Now, if you have a bunch of people who hype up the value and blow up the value of your stock based on nothing effectively, because there's no reason that like Tesla should be valued the way it is compared to
Tesla brings in more than Albania.
right. Compared to this time last year, there is no reason the stock should be valued the way it is. And this is what they did not double their output or more than double their output. And I think, in fact, they might have shrunk their output since last year. So there is no reason that the Tesla stock should be valued where it is, except for the fact that it's a speculative asset. So speculative assets now, because they are attached to companies that produce in the future and have output in the future, then don't directly let's say you want to blow up the value of a company. You don't actually have to print any more money to blow up that value. You just buy up a bunch of their stock and drive up the value. Then that company magically has more value. You can, at a certain point, the Tesla and Apple stock, if they hit a certain value, could be more valuable than there is money in the American economy if the math, like the math could work out. Let's say no one decides to ever sell Tesla or Apple stock for lower price. and they only continue to sell a higher value. And every single sale of Tesla or Apple stock goes higher in value, and no one ever lowers their value ever again. Well, there could be a point where those companies become valued higher than there is money in the fucking US economy. We are dangerously close to those points. And the problem is, not enough people can understand what I just said mathematically to understand why that's a problem.
So, Belgium is the sixth largest economy in the Eurozone. Well, this is from 2017 or 2018. They're right behind Germany, France, Italy, Spain, and the Netherlands. And in 2016, Belgium's GDP was 468 million. And in 2017, Walmart's revenue totaled 873 million. So, according to this, if it were a country, Walmart would be ranked 24th in the world by GDP.
Jesus.
That's a corporation that's bigger than, how many countries are there? There's like 180.
It's like, I think 205 or something. Close to 200 countries in the world, if not over.
195. So
Yeah.
24 from 95, 100. They're bigger than 171 countries on Earth individually. That's insane.
Holy shit. Yeah. And that's like a company.
That's a company. Right behind them is Volkswagen. In 2017, they brought in 276 million. They'd be number 43. Behind them, Apple with 229. They'd be number 47. Amazon, well, this is in 2017, of course, so 117 million. They were 58. Alphabet, Google, 110. They'd be number 59. So, granted, these numbers are a bit old, and things may have changed a little bit. I'm sure that these companies have increased their yearly revenue. But these are companies that have more income than entire countries.
People too have more income than entire countries.
Well, that too, but entire countries make less money. Puerto Rico, that's like a destination. That's where people in America go to be in the Caribbean without having to, you know, it doesn't require a passport because it's a territory until it got destroyed by hurricanes after hurricane. That place was completely driven by American tourist dollars, and they were only bringing in 110 million a year, and that's not even as much as Amazon. That's just kind of sickening. I think that's exploitation on its own, right there.
Sure, that's what I was about to say. Is the only reason that is possible is because they were exploiting those people, and it becomes down to their GDP. I mean, I don't even want to call it GDP because it's so weird.
The revenue.
Revenue should have been like 4 times higher if colonizers weren't trying to undercut everything they do.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, they go there for a fucking cheap vacation because they don't want to fucking pay the actual cost of what it costs. So they're like, no, we'll put our military there so these fucking lower class people can go to Puerto Rico and act like they're high class. That's what that's for. And then we'll subjugate the people and then make them feel like they should be happy because we didn't kill them off. We could have genocided you guys. Just be happy. We're only making you work for a quarter of your fucking value. That's what fucking Puerto Rico feels like to me, from my perspective. But hey, I'm not from Puerto Rico. I'm just an American.
I've always wanted to go to Puerto Rico, but apparently for the next extended period of time, it's a no-go. You know, having lost their physical infrastructure over the course of multiple hurricane seasons and just ravaged economy as a result, and then corrupt official after corrupt official after corrupt official just emptying every envelope full of money that shows up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're definitely part of the caste system too, because it's like they're definitely American, but they don't get to be when it's like time for Aid After a Storm or fucking Time to Vote. They don't get to be American then. So yeah, this is a caste system that.
I wonder what happened with Cheeto Mussolini in Puerto Rico that made him hate the place so much. That's why he does things to entities, or in this case, doesn't do anything for them. Because he got spurred with his attempt at creating a football league, and that didn't really work out for him. And then he, you know, basically did whatever he could to undermine the NFL, and then doesn't like the post office because can't make money off of a constitutionally mandated organization, and got to figure out a way to make money off of that. I know I'm picking on him, and I know that it's a much larger systemic or institutional machine that's doing a lot of these things. But like you said, those are Puerto Ricans are Americans. They just don't get to vote, and they don't get help when they need it.
Yeah, so that's where again it's like we are still trying to get a lot of Americans recognition as being Americans. They're not the only ones either, because fucking DC basically don't count. Which, you have a lot of black people working there, doing the service, and then their vote's not counting. Because DC is very much a chocolate city. That's where I'm like, it's really, it's super bittersweet to be in to go to DC as a black person, because you see so many black people there, and then you're like, what's so weird about this? And then you're like, oh, they're always in service positions.
Wait, DC's home to a historically black college.
Was it Howard? I
think so. Yeah, Howard University. It's a privately, federally chartered, historically black university in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I've spoken to Howard before. Fucking yeah, man. That shit is crazy because then there's a few places where you go and it's very obviously the black people are the servant class still. While I was in Tennessee, it's just weird there, man. Memphis, we went to Graceland, and it's like still backwards as fucking a way that I'm like, man, I don't even know how black people stay there. It must just be
that hard to get away from.
Yeah, like holy shit. Or maybe they're just trying to be resilient in the face of that, but god damn, I want to get the fuck out of Memphis as soon as I noticed that shit. That was disturbing. Cuz again, it's like you see the black people are the ones working, never getting to be the ones enjoying. And that's the problem. They don't get to enjoy those things in those places.
So I'm looking at a list of historically black colleges and universities. It's the U.S. News and World Report best historically black colleges and universities. Memphis is not on this list. There are 80 schools. I'm not seeing Memphis. Oh, there's one in Nashville, Fisk. Oh no, that's in Tennessee. So is Memphis. Well, let's see.
Yeah, I actually was fortunate to go to Howard for the Black Blockchain Summit last year.
Oh, that's cool.
Um,
Howard's listed as number 2, just behind Spelman College in Atlanta.
yeah, Howard's awesome. Because yeah, whenever I was there, was right when they were having a problem with. There was like some white people who had been walking their dogs on the Howard lawn and like having their dogs shit there basically, and they're like, "Oh no, we didn't know." Like, yeah, fucking right, motherfucker. You just trying to be undercover racist.
So on the second image of the Howard University photos, still on U.S. News, is some 3 black medical students and an attending physician showing them how to intubate. It looks like no, they're cutting a hole in somebody's trachea of a white dummy. I find that kind of amusing, and also kind of like, man, these medical device teaching aid companies, manufacturers, they can't
think
make
they make
they can't make a black one.
you
Really?
gotta be a black person who wants to make black dummies, and nobody's gonna give you a business loan for that shit because you're black.
God, they can't even. Yeah, well, I wonder how much of our existing manufacturing is like that, where there's. I mean, I know that there have been problems over the last several decades of like there was no Black Barbie for a long time, or if there was, she wasn't prominently featured in any of the marketing. Uh, there, there's a really good image circulating on the internet recently of a. It's like this artist created variations of classic or iconic American themes, like the woman getting ready to go out to a fancy dinner or to a party. Um, and instead of a white or upper class suburbanite woman, it's a black woman, and the woman nursing her child is white. And then there's one of a nail salon, and the women getting their feet done, they're all Asian, and the women doing their nails are all white women. Um, there's a I think one of the things about it is that the one of the captions was, "Does this make you uncomfortable?" And it didn't make me uncomfortable. I just thought it's like, well, sure, why not? Why not? But
Oh shit!
the
So check this out. So first Barbie doll, 1959. They launched an African American doll named Christy, but she was supposed to be Barbie's cousin. Oh wait, no. Okay, no, she had the body of Barbie's cousin. But they still had a black one in 1967, but it flopped. So they were trying apparently in 1967, which is fairly early for a white owned company to be making a black doll. But then the first actual black Barbie was in 1980. So the first black Barbie was 1980, but the first black doll made by the Barbie or by Mattel was 1967 on the Barbie line. So that's like, it's not, obviously if they were like revolutionary, they would have made it from day one, but that's not, they weren't a political company. So
yeah,
that's better than nothing. Like, I'll give Barbie credit, the Barbie Mattel credit where credit's due. Like, obviously, if the shit flopped, they were trying to do it to get black people rather than because black people were out buying Barbie dolls. Um, so yeah, that's like, to me, that's a company that valued black dollars at a time when black people were not necessarily interested in toys because there was other shit happening. Like, you know, I'm sure a black family in the 60s had other concerns than buying their kid toys, where it's not to say that they wouldn't buy them toys. It's just they got other concerns in the 60s. Like that we still have now, but not nearly as bad. So again, that's where I'm like, I can see how black people weren't rushing to go give Mattel money just because they made a black doll after 7 years or after 8 years finally. Like, oh, you gave us a black doll after 8 years. Thanks, massa. Here you go. Here, take my hard-earned money that I got for 3/5 of the value of what the white man would have got. Here, take this after 8 long years of me begging you to get a black doll, or not having a black doll. So I can understand why they weren't rushing out.
I found one of the images. I'm gonna put it in the thread. Yeah, marketing in this country is really surreal. It's I think we're still kind of within the mist or the fog of um, having something is status. I think that I don't think that we've. I think we're getting to a point where we're getting close. We're approaching this like critical mass where the technology itself will be so good that even entry level phones will or computers are. I mean, they already are way better. Entry level computers today are significantly more capable than the computers that we learned how to type on, which were essentially glorified word processors. And our phones can do things that, my first laptop wasn't as sophisticated as my phone. I could probably do a little bit more on it, like full featured word processing, but that's just a word processor. I think my phone has greater resolution, video display resolution, than my first laptop computer. Uh, I think that we're really close. Cars are safe and fuel efficient, and they're somewhat affordable, but only within the. Actually, no, they're affordable in China, so they've got to be affordable in other places too. Just a matter of bringing that kind of manufacturing process. But I think that we're getting close to a stage in our like technological development where having technology isn't really a status symbol like it was before.
Well, yeah, because nobody can see it.
Yeah.
So because the lines have been so blurred, where now the iPhones have hit their point of profit diminishing returns, they have to start doing the cheaper models than the upper end. So it's like, oh, iPhone isn't the same status as before. So now it's like, oh, because we also have to wear masks. Is it like, oh, you got the Gucci mask that's actual Gucci, or you know, it's like, is it the fact that you have had everyone COVID tested and you have a personal bubble and nobody has to wear masks? Is that how you show status now? Um, or it's like, oh, I didn't send my kid to school. We hired a teacher and now we have a micro class. Is that how you show uh, elite status now? And there's so many things where people are trying to figure out, like, oh, does this mean I'm upper class? Does this mean I'm wealthy? And people are still concerned with it, and then trying to figure out what the wealthy people are doing, to the point where, I think a lot of wealthy people have given up trying to set the trends, and they don't care if people are like watching them anymore. So there's enough scattered, sporadic um, versions of how people are acting. So it's really difficult to pick out a single elite culture. Um, so in that, I think it's like I do feel like we are on the end of fad culture in the way it existed for like the past 20 years. Because before cable television, fads existed for sure, because you have dances and songs that we can point to now, where you're like, oh, everybody knew the twist. Everybody now, like, if you're over the age of probably 25, you know what the twist is. Like, you know how to do it, you know the song. Me saying it probably elicits a fucking song response in your head because at a certain point, culture is so concentrated that fads are unavoidable. But now I think we're at a point where you can not only avoid fads, but actively stay away from them in a way that is like, um, it's keeping people. Um, it's like the tribes. It's the tribe effect where um, the people who are like, oh, I like this thing or I like this basketball team. They start to articulate themselves against other people. Um, but in that now, because it's really difficult to visually assess what tribes people are in, that shit is starting to evaporate really quick. Um, so yeah,
You just reminded me of a poem by what the heck? Was not intentional. Uh, Daniel shared a Edgar Allan Poe poem with me a couple of months ago called "The Red Death," and you just reminded me of that because you said something about how are the elites doing it with their bubble where everyone's tested, and it reminded me of of reading through this guy like gets together all of his friends and then by the end of the night everyone's dying and from what I read about it, it happened during he wrote it sometime around a cholera outbreak where everyone was dying. But cholera doesn't take doesn't happen overnight, but it definitely gets you quick. But it reminded me of that because he throws a party for all of his friends to because they can't take it anymore. They're all like fed up with trying to avoid the Red Death.
Not only that, he welds the gates shut so
Oh
that
yeah,
nobody can leave,
yeah.
even if they wanted to.
Can't leave America because no country will let us in.
yeah, that's a twisted irony, right?
Yeah.
After the build the wall stuff.
And
All
the mask of the Red Death came to mind for me as soon as we started hearing about the pandemic and hearing about how more well-heeled people were dealing with it by from billionaires stockpiling to millionaires flying to their summer homes or their winter homes or wherever to be away from people and
yeah,
COVID fall,
except all those
COVID
assholes
falling
in
upon them.
L.A. They went to whatever some place in Iowa or Idaho or something like that and spread COVID around. They went to a
Mm-hmm.
place that had like one ICU bed, and there were like 30 of them, and then that turned into like 400 of them, and then there were just in one county. Where was that? Oh God, I can't remember. This was so long ago. I'll never find it. It was just one of those things that struck me as like fucking assholes because they're like running away from the city. Actually, you know what? Right as all this stuff was happening, a buddy of mine was like, "Man, I'm kind of worried about this. I'm in Chicago. I'm thinking about like getting out of town." I was like, "Where are you gonna go? This thing's already everywhere." And and then I see all these things about people trying to flee cities, and it's like they're gonna leave their city. They're gonna go expose a bunch of people who haven't been to the city to whatever they've got. They're gonna go to a place where they have fewer resources. That's like the dumbest fucking thing that I can think of doing is trying to leave wherever you're situated. Even if it's bad, you have resources there, you have agency. But if you go to some place where you don't know anybody, there goes your agency. There goes your ability to get anything accomplished.
it doesn't sound like it was a very well thought out course of action by all these people who mark their success and status by how many homes they have to retreat to on any given point in time. So it does beg the question, what does status even mean? You know, it's just more illusory and vapid than anything else. I think what we've learned from this is not to get maudlin. I think the most important aspect of living a human life is to ensure that you have as much of your health as possible, regardless of what you were born with. And health is one of the supposed rights. You know, it's life. Health is part of life. And we have people in our country who are being deprived of their lives and subsequently their health, their mental health, their physical health. They're being oppressed. They're being shot. They're being attacked physically, verbally, psychologically. I'm sure that there's some sort of underreported or unseen epidemic of mental illness or addiction among certain demographics solely because of the abuse that they've endured over several generations. And trauma is generational. I can personally attest to that. So, you know, it's there. And with this COVID, with this pandemic situation, we've seen, you know, people relying solely on their wealth in order to differentiate themselves from other people aren't necessarily spared the dangers of the pandemic. And you know, people who have, you know, more sense about how to go about preventing the spread of the pandemic to other people that they care about or, you know, within their families. It's not an income dependent type of situation. Anybody with enough sense and with the motivation can learn how to do it and apply those principles and maintain them. And, you know, on top of that, we still have people who are demonstrating with, you know, a demographic of people who are demonstrating that, of course, they're capable of saving themselves and saving others and saving the people that they care about. And there are just so many external factors weighing down on them from just about every angle, creating a distinct atmosphere of disadvantage.
Yeah, there's a again, when some people refuse to acknowledge that exists, you end up with like the people who are willing to justify murder in the streets, and that's like, again, um, it's a vicious cycle to get stuck in with. Again, you can't convince those people out of that cycle, and that's kind of where, you know, that ran at the beginning of the show is like, yeah, I'm not trying to convince those people now that I'm like, that my life matters. I'm not asking them for fucking acceptance anymore. I'm past that point. A lot of other people are. But that's also why when we're trying to express that to people, it's like, these are the reasons we need to express it in certain ways so it's not misconstrued, but also not overlooked. Because once again, as a black person with a black voice, I can't speak for other black people, but I can only be my own black voice. So as long as I put things out there from my perspective as far as you know, how things are, because in reality it's like me as an individual, I've had to face a lot of things, but the things that I end up speaking on are meant to then highlight the situation that is, because it's possible. Like you can, the great thing about empathy is you can be upset about something that does not directly affect you if that thing is worthy of your anger. And in that, when we're looking at things that everybody should be upset about, it's not just black people who should be upset about citizens getting killed in the streets. Black people are just the ones. I mean, it's not just black people, but non-racist people are the ones who have to then articulate, like, hey, black people deserve equal application of the law and what it's meant to be applied to them and all people. And you know, as it's been pointed out, it's not just black people getting killed by cops. Cops shouldn't be killing anyone. But when they are killing black people, disproportionate numbers, black people have to say something, or else that subjugation has then done its full purpose and silenced us by violence.
Well, if you're not going to say something, it's just going to keep happening. And, you know, it's important to have a voice no matter who you are. And it all depends on what somebody uses their voice for in this kind of a situation. In any situation, really, your voice becomes a call for action or a source of action. And we're in a time where, see, it's always been there. That's the thing. It's always been there. But right now, people's voices can be amplified more broadly over time and space in a compressed fashion, so very quickly. And if somebody has the megaphone and they're using their voice to incite violence or to justify murder for any reason, it's not just like, oh, some murders are okay, some murders are not okay. There's a difference between, you know, it's murder. So when you have somebody using their voice to justify murder, which is a criminal act by any stretch of the imagination, instead of using their voice to acknowledge the situation and say, why did this happen? And what can we do to keep this from occurring? Or why is this happening so much to this group of people? And again, it's if we had more non-racists who are involved in positions of power that could influence the racist organizations or the organizations that had a lot of racists in them, perhaps we would see some change. But then that begs the question, does that mean that regardless of political leaning, we essentially have a leadership that is implicitly racist?
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. That's not even a question. Not even a question at this point, from my perspective at least. A lot of blind white people will say that's a good question, but it's not a question from my perspective.
Can a system that's founded on racism and slavery ever not have racist leaders?
Yeah, no, I don't think so personally either, and that's why, again, a lot of people, I think, would argue that that is a, philosophical debate. And I'm like, nope, I know the answer to that. I know the definitive answer.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was a rhetorical question, but
Oh no, for sure. No.
but no, that's I think that's the point. Um, we've got we've got this incredible communication system, this real time communication system that allows people to communicate with large groups of people simultaneously on the other side of the planet, even, and it's not being used to its fullest. It's being used to sell people stuff that they don't even need. It's being used to sell stuff and make people want things. God, I've got so many things. I've got books that I've been meaning to read for years that I get, and then something comes up and I don't have time. But then I see some other book that I know that I'm going to want to read at some point, so I make sure to grab a copy of it because sometimes these things disappear, and either you forget about it or you forget about it, or the book itself disappears and you can't find a copy of it. Limited edition.
Or you have news outlets that are using all of their power to share as much information, including vast quantities of useless information. So you have a headline about a new flavor of chicken nugget,
Fucking chicken nuggets.
or a headline about an expensive caffeinated beverage, or a new marketing campaign being advertised. It's so self-serving. And if we only use that mental energy that those people who are responsible for the content of those pages could be directed towards promoting some form of critical thought, some article or series of articles that instead of learning about a new flavor of chicken nugget, you learn about how to be a person who can even feel the need for a more equitable social structure within your country, instead of providing a bunch of visceral tableaus and snapshots that are supposed to evoke feelings for like 30 seconds and then you move on to the next thing. Then I think we would have more people willing to have conversations. But so many people are just couched in their consumer culture, and they want that coffee, they want those nuggets, they want those cheap tacos, or in a gentrified neighborhood, they're waiting for that local taco restaurant to open so they can get their gourmet tacos with, whatever accoutrement and, expensive margaritas come with them. I mean, apparently that shit matters way more than, being a human being. Maybe I've just gone off the reservation a little bit. I just don't understand.
I don't know,
Maybe
man.
I'm missing something.
I can make some really fancy shrimp tacos. Like, holy shit. A person made these, not a food truck, not a restaurant made these. It's not that hard. Get some tortillas at the store, and get some shrimp if you like shrimp, or get some beef if you like beef, or chicken even, and get some crushed red pepper, or ground cayenne pepper, and cook that shit up and throw it in between your tortillas. It can be delicious. I like to put shredded cheese on the tortilla at the final stages of cooking it up, and then it kind of seals it in so it doesn't become all sloppy from whatever juices come off of your meats or off of the vegetables or the salsa that you use. I don't have to pay a premium for tacos anymore because I can
Once
make.
I my own tortillas at home, it was over. It was a wrap. It's like everything is. I can eat a fucking tortilla without any toppings, and it's gonna taste amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Like once you start frying the shells,
Oh yeah.
it's just that's the like I can put my tacos against anybody's just because I know how to fry the perfect shell. Like once you can do that pinnacle shit at your own place, it don't like I don't need somebody to make my tacos for
That's
me.
right. Like, how do you like your butter? Do you like it like just clarified, or do you want it browned a little bit? You know, do you want it seasoned? There's so many different ways that can go. Like once I figured out how to make like a really like a next level taco, I haven't made consciously made. Well, I haven't even had a hard shell taco in a long time because we don't get them, and I don't go to Taco Bell because they stopped making the Mexi Melt and the chili cheese burrito. But you know what? Now that I think about it, I can probably make my own damn chili cheese burrito, and a Mexi Melt's not that hard. So I have even less reason to go back to Taco Bell if they ever happen to, acquiesce and return my two menu items that I only went there for.
Well, and they sell Taco Bell seasoning on the shelf too, like straight up. If you want to do Taco Bell shit at your home, you can make it better. Like Taco Bell isn't that unhealthy.
No,
I
it's
will
not.
But if you want to make higher, leaner meats, or
Mm,
one of the things I do is actually use meatless meat because it's like, for various reasons. But if I want to do tacos, then it's just 100% guilt free taco that tastes just the same as
oh
a
man, now I need to
ground
do that.
taco.
It's funny. Like every time I walk by one of the meatless meats, I'm always thinking, it's like, what can I make with that? And then I don't want to hang out at the grocery store for too long, but I need to make one of these meatless tacos.
Dude, I'll put my meatless tacos up against any taco on the fucking planet, and because it's meatless, like it'll be one step lower, but then you're like, oh shit, this meatless taco's on par with like a real taco.
Yeah,
And that's where I'm saying I'll put that shit up against anybody's because at this point the meatless meats are so good. It's on that person to cook, to season them and cook
yeah.
them right.
It's just if you could
All,
make it taste like carnitas, or whatever your meat of choice, and it comes out with the right kind of like browned surfaces, and maybe even a little burnt in a good way, if you got that part down. Like I haven't gotten that down yet with the Impossible or Beyond meats.
yeah, you have to sort of put a little sugar in there or
Yeah,
some sort of like
yeah, that makes
something
sense.
that'll
It'll
caramel.
caramelize it.
Yeah, that's the only way it'll do it because it's not like, well, uh I think it's Impossibles. They actually do caramelize. I think there's something in there. They might put a little bit of sugar
Yeah,
in their meat, but it does actually caramelize on its own. But
yeah.
yeah, I've found that with the actual meatless stuff, you have to you do have to glaze it with something if you want that.
So then the trick would be to identify the ingredients to make a good chorizo sausage, and then utilize that with the Beyond or Impossible or just the meatless meat. That way you could get the chorizo flavor, and then it would just be a matter of cooking the meatless sausage so that it has the right kind of texture and size.
Yep.
And then you've got a meatless chorizo.
Honestly, I've been trying the meatless sausages, and they're getting a lot better. I
Oh,
haven't tried chorizo, but Morning Stars, sausage patties, and sausage links are really good for not being actual meat. Because what ends up happening is I'm not a vegetarian, but like I don't want to die early, so every time I eat protein, I don't necessarily eat meat, and I use the meatless options because a lot of them are like less. There's less cholesterol and less sodium in them,
yeah.
and there's no animal killed in the process. So there's like all these benefits to it where they're getting really, really close to the fucking, like having it so the texture and the taste and the way it cooks are pretty much indistinguishable. So, I check in on that shit. But again, it's just fun to try like a protein recipe with a non-meat meat to see how close you can get it, because I'm finding there's some meat substitutes that don't actually taste like meat, but they're still really good, and then they just become this whole different flavor profile. So it's like, um, what's it? Oh, is neat meats. There's like one that they cook up to this really, it's like a different texture, and it's not quite like meat, but it's still really good. So I've been trying all these different brands, and then to varying degrees of success. But
Hmm. Yeah, it says here you can make burgers, chili, sloppy joes, and more. A
what
5.5 ounce package is equivalent to 1 pound of ground beef.
and the cool thing about neat is it comes like in a
Pouch.
dry powder form, or it's like it's not powder, but you add water to it to make it, so it's not something that's like refrigerated.
Yeah. They've got
Original.
breakfast, Italian, Mexican, and beef blends.
I think we tried some of the Italian sausage flavor or blend or whatever, and then the regular meatball. And the flavors were really good, and the textures were different. They weren't necessarily quite like sausage or beef, but again, it's like I just feel like when they're marketing these things, they just need to consult an actual meat eater on instead of trying to be like, oh, this is just as good as meat. Like, no, get a meat eater to tell you like where to put this on a thing, because you don't. I feel like if they started calling these protein substitutes or something that's like not necessarily meant to be meat replacement, like they could have had a better marketing campaign, because then the texture, if you're expecting a certain texture, it's always going to be a failure unless it's like perfect. And that's why it's like some of the stuff like neat.
They
Um,
make an egg substitute.
I haven't tried it, but it's probably good.
4.5 ounce package is equivalent to 18 eggs.
Wow.
Speaking of eggs, I read recently that there was okay. So this is a really kind of weird tangential, uh, get rid of food type thing. Apparently, during like the 80s and 90s, there was a problem with cholesterol levels, and so people were trying to reduce cholesterol. The easiest way to do that is to reduce your intake of eggs. Apparently, this has this secondary effect where eggs also help kick the libido into motion. And so some people were reducing their amount of protein intake, of egg intake, and apparently this had some generational effect on sex drive. Let me see if I need to find this now because it was really amusing. I had a good laugh at it. You think I could find some of this stuff inside my bookmarks or history? Maybe this was it. I can't find it now. I should have saved it. Damn
Yeah, they had a lot of junk nutrition science in the 80s and 90s.
it. Yeah. Well, it was just one of those things where it's like, huh, eating a bunch of eggs and salty foods and fatty foods weren't really the bad factor. It was all the sugar. Maybe that's why I can't find the wrong thing. And we know that certain types of cholesterol, uh, the LDL or whatever, the HDL, one of the two, it's like bad for you because it causes your plaque to build up in your vascular tissue. But there's also a lot of good to be had with the other cholesterol, which is apparently what lubricates our vascular system. I wonder how long
Yeah,
that. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, they hadn't figured out that there were two types of cholesterol at that point yet.
I mean, you know, how long have they been rewriting like all of the information just to make money? Because we need fat to be healthy. We need sodium in our diet so that our nervous system and brains work properly. Uh, um, we need cholesterol so that our blood pumps properly. We need to eat eggs apparently so we can have a normal sex drive. Like all of this is to make money.
Yep, our body functions got turned into a product,
Man.
or even our like just daily. You know, I was telling a friend today. Um, I don't necessarily want to stop my day every fucking 3 hours to eat. Like we've been sold this 3 meal a day thing. Like I don't know. Maybe there's some. You know, some people do need 5 meals a day or 3 meals and two snacks or whatever. But there's so much that goes into like stopping your day to consume that is built into this culture that I'm like, fucking hell, I can't think about that about food that many times a day. Even foods I like. The fact that you are prompted to try to eat that many times in a 24-hour period is just baffling to me. I'm like, what are these people, fucking Olympic athletes or some shit where you really need to stop and eat, or are you just not eating correctly when you have your meals? Because I'm like, I've been able to tune my shit to where I don't need to eat five fucking times a day and I'm just fine. I like, it's not that I don't sleep. I might stay up till fucking 5 or 6 in the morning because I'm not tired. Like if I don't understand people who need drugs to stay up that late because my
Yeah.
just works well enough that I fucking, if I didn't, like, I stayed up till 6 o'clock or 6:30 this morning just because I was awake. I didn't go to sleep because I didn't feel like going to sleep. I can't imagine needing drugs to do that. Like, I've been that way since I was a kid. I feel like I feel bad for anybody who can't do that without drugs. Like, it's not that I don't, like, if somebody wants to do drugs, that's fine. I have no problem with that. It's I feel bad for somebody who needs drugs to, like, just stay up till 6. Like, apparently if you're not bogged down by a bunch of shitty ass meats and a bunch of fucking like Doritos or whatever all the fucking time, your brain can just function most of the time. Cause I stayed up till 6:30, got up at like 10 or 10:30 or 11 or something. I don't remember exactly what time, but went about my day. It's like I don't need to go to bed at 11 and wake up at 6, fucking eat immediately, eat breakfast, like have a snack, go to work. There's all these things that our culture tries to regiment us to do from. It's like the elementary school schedule is meant for everybody. Is adults don't need to be on the same fucking schedule as an elementary school kid. Elementary school kids don't need to be on that schedule. Fucking, like, they're only on that schedule so their parents can go to work. And it's there's so many things about our arbitrary uh circadian cycle and eating cycle that's also meant to serve our bosses most of the time, that I'm like, I feel like taking control back over those parts of my life is like subverting patriarchy and subverting this fucking system that tries to have control over every goddamn part of your body. Because even then, I'm like, if it was the opposite way and they're like, oh, you need to eat 3 meals and 5 snacks, I could go eat 11 meals to subvert their shit and subvert their control over my body. It's not that you just have to like eat fewer meals. Because when I eat, I'll eat a fucking whole pizza and a couple chicken sandwiches or some shit. I'm not like eating an apple. No, I'll eat like
I ate a third of a watermelon today.
That's I don't count
it was
water.
Delicious.
Counts to me as water because you hydrate better from fruit. So I don't even count watermelon as eating, honestly. Like straight up. If I eat watermelon, that to me is drinking water. So
yeah, I guess
like
that makes sense.
I don't even count that shit as eating because you burn it so fast that counting it as eating is like lying to yourself, really.
Well, you gotta chew it. I mean, I can't just like swallow the whole fucking.
Well, I mean, you physically eat it, but because of the way that your body.
I get it. I get what you're getting at. Like it's like definitely more fluid than it is solid.
And your body's gonna burn those calories. Like it's gonna burn more calories than are gonna be in what you can eat, most likely. Like because of you eating them. Like the fact that you're chewing and then burning off the fiber actually takes energy, and there's not that many calories in watermelon to the point where like when you drink water it's like negative 12 calories, right? So like
I had salt and lime juice to my watermelon. I find that it makes the watermelon flavor itself it brings it down just a little bit, and that's the salt also has a similar effect.
Well, because people think of water as 0 calories. It's actually negative 12 or something like negative 7. It's either negative 7 or negative 12 because you actually end up burning calories from drinking the water, from processing it. And there's like, it's not like 7 calories isn't a whole lot. So when you're saying like negative 7 or negative 12, that's not like, it's not a ton, but that's why people drink water and lose weight. Like when you retain water, that's not the same thing as drinking water. And retaining water is actually a lot of times from sodium. The body is a crazy fucking machine. But it's like, again, when you're like being told all of these things based on junk science, like it's on people to listen to like whatever's out there and then try to learn what's actually real. Because, you know, again, when they didn't know about HDL and LDL, they're saying don't eat eggs, and then their fucking boners stop working.
Poor bastards.
That's why they're so mad.
Exceptional Randos Show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening. Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.